Hey everybody, this is James over at TeaDB bringing you another drinking Inbetweenisode. So today I am drinking a tea that was I've had before. It was generously sent to me by Darius. Thank you, Darius. You can read a lot of his tasting notes over the years at the Badger and Blade Cafe Shaving Forum. This is a ripe Pu'erh made by Dayi in 2007. And it's one of their special productions, so every year, or at least a lot of years, they'll have special productions. Things like their numbered recipes tend to be more of their run-of-the-mill teas, mass production. I enjoy them still, but teas like this one, which is the Anxiang ripe Pu'erh, I think standing for Secret Fragrance, are sort of like their special productions that they will make less often. And I believe this one, it may have been made more recently, but not that I'm aware of, actually. So it was made in 2007, and I'm not sure if it was made any year but that. They made a shu and a sheng. The shu has stood the test of time in my memory. I think we brought it on to the show probably 4 years ago at this point, in episode 70-something or 80-something as a ripe Pu'erh. And I think it's held in my memory as absolutely one of my favorite ripe Pu'erh teas that I've had. So when Darius sent me this, I was extremely excited to retry it and to see how it measured up. So unlike a normal episode, I'm actually brewing this in my ripe pot that I use for more gongfu style ripes. And for the sake of comparison, I also made a brew of the tea I was drinking this morning, which is a 1990s ripe brick I brought on a little bit ago. You know, it's not a perfect comparison. These are different sizes, whatever. I still think it can be a little bit interesting and make some of the characteristics stand out. Okay, so I have steep number 2 here. I had steep 1 just a second ago to get sort of acclimated to it. And I may go ahead and make steep number 3 as well. So the aroma has already changed a bit. Initially, when I smelled it, it had a lot of the sweet cherry. It still, occupies a more dynamic, complex range of aromas than you would normally get from a ripe, veering a little bit more into aromatic wood territory here. So here we go, steep number 2. And just the texture of the tea is just outstanding. And I've actually had the opportunity to have a couple different stored versions of this. And, you can't always exclude the possibility of fakes with Dayi, but there's a good chance that at least a couple of them were real. And they don't actually compare that well with Darius's version. This is by far the best version I've had. So, however Darius is storing them in Atlanta, he's doing quite well for this tea, especially, in my opinion. So, thank you, Darius. It's got that sort of silk, really engaging silk, creamy texture, but it's also thick, and it's not light in the body. It sort of almost has a syrup body too. The taste right now is a little bit less in the cherry. The initial steep was maybe a little brighter and a little more in that cherry sweetness. This one's more in the woody territory, sort of like the aroma I smelled there. Better depth, better body than those teas. Really good aftertaste. Going to be also paying attention to the somatics of this tea. So this pot makes a little bit extra. It's just a little bit larger than my other pot. So this is still steep number 2 here. Yeah, just really, really good. Definitely holding up well with my memory, to say the least. I believe this is one of a somewhat tippy blend of shu. We can take a look. Easier to tell after the session just by dumping everything out. So smaller leaves, possibly. It's definitely a blend, being Dayi. This is not a single estate production, and I think it has beats most single estate productions, or maybe all single estate productions I've had of ripe. So I'm moving on to this tea. This is a ripe tea I was drinking this morning. But I'm gonna brew this first. So getting that water nice and hot. Steep number 3. So one thing I noticed, I took a quick look at the previous videos. It brews a little lighter, then it gets a little darker, as is typical of ripe. It's probably not on the super heavily fermented end, just because it is, I think, pretty complex and more dynamic. Occupies like a pretty high range of notes for a ripe pour. I mean, definitely a ripe pour. It doesn't taste not like a ripe pour. Okay, still quite hot on the nose. Okay, so here we are drinking this guy over here, mainly for the sake of comparison. It's simpler, not as thick, more of a ginseng wood taste to it. Basic. I mean, I enjoy this tea. Definitely in the sort of creamy end of things, not nearly as complex or as interesting. The mouthfeel, I mean, if you want to make this tea look bad, this is the right way to make it look bad. The texture of the tea, things like that, just not quite as interesting as this tea over here. Okay, so here we are, steep number 3, and I will probably call it here, but I can guarantee you I will be drinking this tea throughout the rest of today. Probably share some with my wife when she gets home. Cheers, guys. Still quite hot. I'll give that a second to cool down. Seems like it'll be in the sort of oaty, creamy category of tea. I think for me what stands out about this tea is sort of just the depth of it is just way above average for a ripe. The complexity and the range of notes is also outstanding for a ripe. The aroma is also pretty good. The texture, I think, is also really, really good. So those, I think, are some of the standouts for this tea. I think as far as ripes go, I think if you find this one and you can find a really well-stored one, which as I have, me and another friend of mine have found out is not too easy to do, then I think it's worth getting. That being said, if you can find a less well-stored one than this, and this, to be clear, is probably fitting into the fairly dry stored thing, so I think the dry storage has suited this well as opposed to something like Guangzhou or Taiwan, which is just inherently a little more humid. But even if you can find a version that has been less well stored, it might still be worth a flyer on to see if you like it. But I've come to really appreciate Darius's version more the more I've tried some of these alternative stored versions. Cheers, guys. Sort of bringing back that robust light fruit cherry sweetness, still predominantly wood, but some more of that. This is maybe the thickest brew of it, so I really think this tea will be going for definitely quite a few brews for a ripe tea. Oats, grains, those are some new flavors in this tea, so changing a bit steep to steep. I'd say each steep has been fairly different from the previous one. So I am going to give this tea a 8.2 rating. So that puts it at near masterpiece, very great, blown away. I don't know if I've given a tea that rating before. So again, it's in the ripe Pu'erh category. Probably the highest rating I would give to any ripe. I can't think of one that I would prefer. So really love this version. Really like this one. So big thank you to Darius for sending it to me, and I will see you all next time. Cheers.